podcasting is long form. And all a long form podcast really is a bunch of really good hook story lessons, future paces, and calls to action. If you think about it, it's mostly stories and lessons. That's really all it is. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode, Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. It was last week's episode, obviously. Episode number 80, 2 important understandings for making money with your podcast. I know that was a very in-depth / potentially not explained very well topic, so maybe I will touch on that again in the future. Again, you can always reach out and ask questions. I am available through email at NeverQuitKid on Instagram. Any questions you have, please reach out because it will help me understand what is landing and what isn't and how to do better. Today, for episode number 81, one practice that really helped my confidence with speaking. I'm actually going to give 2. I'll give 2. Let me just make a note of that. All right. One of the common beliefs I have is that most people think that where they are today is where they're going to be forever, and where somebody else is today is where that person has been forever. So if you come across this podcast and you listen and you think that I am a reasonably good speaker, number 1, I appreciate that very much. Number 2, I have a long way to go. But number 3, I was not at this level when I started. If you went back and listened to the very first episodes that I ever did back in 2017, you probably would not feel the same way you feel about me today. The reason I say that is because there's just been a lot of opportunity for me to grow and practice different things. And today I'm going to go through 2 tactics that have really helped me become a more effective speaker. Another, I guess maybe I'll see how many things we can kind of freestyle off of this topic. So the first one, I want to get right into the value. I don't want to make you wait for it. It was probably an entire year I did this for. Every single day, because we do an episode every day at Next Level University. Every single day I would go on my story and I would do what we talked about before, a hook, a story, a lesson, a future pace, and a call to action. So I would jump on there and say, okay, in the next minute on my story, I want to convey a powerful reason through storytelling why someone would listen to today's episode of the podcast. A simple thing might be, this is a huge reason why relationships don't succeed. Right? There's the hook. I'll never forget when I was younger, I had trust issues because I was dealing with this and this and this and this, blah, 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 blah. There's a story. The lesson might be, without vulnerability, it's really hard to build a deeply trusting relationship. That would be the lesson. The future paces, usually the future pace, I would connect to the call to action. So if you feel like you could use a little bit of perspective, or you feel like you could use a little bit more experience in your relationships, make sure you click the link below for today's episode on blank. And I did that every single day for a year. Not every day. I won't say I did it every day. I tried to do it every day, but I probably did it 80% of the time. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to be more concise with my storytelling, which if you're listening to this, maybe I'm not with these episodes. These episodes are a little bit different, but there is a minute. And in that minute, you have to go through these, the hook, the story, the lesson, the future pace, the call to action. This was a very valuable practice for me. Then when I started going on other podcasts, I would kind of try to do the same thing. Somebody might ask me a question and I would try to, and I still do, I still try to do this. It's conscious. It's something I'm trying to be more and more conscious of. But if somebody says to you, why is consistency so important? A good hook might be, do you think you could do the splits tomorrow? And then you can go into, I'm willing to bet if somebody offered you $1 million by this time next year and said, if you can do the splits by this time next year, I'll give you $1 million, you're going to practice them as consistently as possible. Right? That's kind of a story. The lesson is consistency is super important. So it's just an example of how I try to do it. But the practice is go on your Instagram story every time you have an episode dropping. Hold up your phone and think, and you can think about it first, right? Okay, hook, story, lesson, future pace, call to action. Well, the call to action is going to be listen to today's episode. Future pace, we don't really have to worry about that too much. All right, hook, story, lesson, call to action. Hook. What can I do that would draw people in? My favorite example of a hook is you'll never believe what happened to me this weekend. The great hook. Story. How do I connect a powerful story to the lesson so the story actually lands? Lesson, that is the value, and the call to action is listen to today's episode. I heard this at an event I went to one time. Don't ever give a lesson without a story, and don't ever give a story without a lesson. So that's another thing that I'm trying to do every single time I do this. So that's point one. Point two, I have a very good friend. Shout out to Eddie Panero. Eddie Panero has a YouTube channel called Your World Within, and he is one of the best speakers I know. He probably is the best speaker I personally know. He is incredible. He's an incredible storyteller. The way he changes his voice, he's just really, really, really good. His pauses. This is something that he practiced for a long time. He might still practice it. He wakes up. Well, I won't speak for exactly how he does it because I don't know. But he'll go onto a random word generator and he will just type, maybe I'm looking for a simple word or maybe a 1-syllable word or a 2-syllable word, whatever it is. And he'll click generate and it'll generate a word. And he tries to do a either 1 minute or 5 minute freestyle speech on that. So let's just say I did that and the word that came up was sidewalk. The goal is just to riff off of that, riff, whatever it is, off of that word to have more comfort just when you're freestyling, you're speaking. So if it was sidewalk, I would say sidewalks are something that are super interesting because very similar to life, you feel like you're super safe. When in reality, there's only, 6 inches between you and the street. And it would be very easy for someone in their car to drive off and unfortunately run you over. And another thing about sidewalks is they kind of create a path for you to follow, but you have to go off the sidewalk to go into the buildings, to go into the clubs, to go into the stores, to get to the beach, blah, 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 blah. If you did a minute of that, if you tried that as your initial practice, my thought behind that is it allows you to think on your feet better because you're just practicing taking a word and then creating stories and lessons and examples and connecting it. So that's another really good practice.
Hi there. This is Dr. Tarryn McCarthy, and I am the host of the Business of Happiness podcast, which would not be in existence were it not for the one and only incredible Kevin Palmieri. Seriously, I am so indebted to Kevin for the service that he provides. Every week he meets with me. He has been coaching me on how to initiate and launch this podcast. He helped me put it together with his great expertise, and every week his whole team works tirelessly to get these podcasts uploaded to Buzzsprout and to deliver my content to my audience. I am so grateful. I couldn't say enough about him. In fact, we've been working together so well. I've seen so much wonderful input from my listeners and asking me for more that in just a few weeks, we're going to be doubling the number of podcasts we produce per week. So this trajectory is just flying and I'm really enjoying the whole process. So I couldn't say enough about him. Please, if this is something you're considering, I highly recommend him. And reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about our experience. Good luck. Bye-bye.
I am willing to bet, even if you just did one of these two, if you have time to do two, awesome. But if you just, under your habits, under your to-do list, however you break out and break down what you should be doing on a day-to-day basis, we track habits, so that's initially where I go. But having some sort of habit of Instagram story, Facebook story, TikTok story, whatever it is, practicing that every single day is going to help you tremendously. I don't know if there's anything that's helped me more other than podcasting every day. Obviously that helps, but podcasting is long form. And all a long form podcast really is a bunch of really good hook story lessons, future paces, and calls to action. If you think about it, it's mostly stories and lessons. That's really all it is. I always try to bring at least 3 or 4 stories to each episode because I think stories really help the lessons land. The best teachers you had, depending on what you value in teachers, probably were the best storytellers. Some of the best movies are the ones that have the best stories, but there's also super deep lessons in them. So that's really my thought for today's episode. Today will be a little bit of a shorter one, probably. What else? Is there anything else? Another thing I did for a while, this was based on advice from a mentor. Every day I would write down a story and a lesson from my day. So I remember one time I got either Instacart or maybe it was Grubhub. I don't remember what it was. But I went out to get the food from the person rather than them having to bring it and knock on the door and all that stuff. And they were unreasonably kind. They were amazing. They were just super, super happy. And we had a wonderful conversation and we were laughing. And my lesson for the day was, if you bring positivity to a situation, it's most likely going to be a more positive situation. And that was my story. My Uber Eats or my Instacart or Grubhub driver, that was my story. Every day I did that for a while. And that just helps you have certain stories. Again, when you go on other podcasts, you're going to use a lot of similar stories. One of the hardest things about doing a podcast every week to the same audience or every day to the same audience like we do is I'm trying not to use the same stories all the time. But that is a challenge because I only have so many stories. So at the end of the day, one of the things I'm always trying to do is accumulate more stories, accumulate more lessons and examples. So those are really 3 or 4 simple ways that can help your confidence with speaking. And then here's the last thing. And this goes without, it's probably super simple. You just got to speak more. That's why I like the story thing, because you're going to speak every single day. I really enjoy the riffing, whatever it is. I think it's riffing off of a word. That's super creative and it's scary because it's hard. You're not going to do it publicly, so nobody's going to laugh at you or anything, but it's hard. It's very challenging. It's very humbling. But the more you can talk, the more you can practice your speaking, then you start to get to certain layers of, okay, now I feel comfortable in front of an audience talking on a certain point. Now let me practice my pauses. Or now let me really practice certain inflections when I get to a certain point in the story. When I get to the sad part of the story, I'll probably turn my voice down a little bit and I'll probably take bigger pauses. Or when I get to the exciting part of the story, that type of stuff, that just comes with time, but that's more of like a tier 4, tier 5 after you feel comfortable talking in a certain way. So hopefully today's episode was valuable. I'm trying to think of a better way to mix in because I was looking at the episodes I've done and a lot of them are deeper understanding, not super tangible. So my goal in 2024, is to do maybe 50-50. More tangible episodes where you have 3 to 5 takeaways. And then maybe half the time I'll do a deeper understanding of just some lessons and an awareness. And then I'll try to do more takeaways with those as well. But I will do a little bit of a year-end review looking at the content, see what landed the best, see what didn't, and then kind of go from there. Just like I advise on here, I will be doing the same thing with my data. If you are struggling with storytelling, if you are struggling with riffing off of words, if you are struggling with speaking, whatever it may be, I would love to hop on a free podcast breakthrough session with you. The feedback I've gotten in the past is, I don't know, I don't really feel like a real podcaster. I'm nervous. I don't want to waste your time. I'm nervous. I'm not big enough yet. I don't have enough episodes. Trust me, I wouldn't offer it every single episode if it's not something I wanted to do, regardless of how far in or how not far in you feel. I don't care if you have a podcast yet. I'm happy to talk to you about what it would look like for you, if it's the right thing for you. Wherever you are in the journey, I promise you are far enough along. So if that is the reason you're afraid to hop on a Zoom, please, I promise. I've done many, many podcast breakthrough sessions, people that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. people that don't know how to get started and need help with the equipment. Wherever you are on that, I promise you are safe and you belong on that Zoom. So if that is a barrier, let me help you break that down. I'd love to chat. Link will be in the show notes as always. Next week for episode number 82, an important lesson about getting on other podcasts. Something that I hear often that I think is really, really holding people back is what we're going to do for next week's episode. As always, I hope you all are practicing effective storytelling. I hope your pauses are feeling smooth. I hope your guests are answering your questions and giving you stuff to work off of. Hope your social media is growing. I hope your Facebook group is growing. I hope everything is growing, and I hope you are growing. Until next week, keep on podcasting, keep on crushing it, and we will talk to you then.